Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 27th of February, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. My co-host in studio today, Brian Gerrish. Welcome to the programme, Brian.
Pleasure to be here.
And we'll be joined today once again by Basil Valentine. Now, later in the programme, Brian is going to be reporting on Hillary Clinton's appearance to give evidence on Epstein, plus British politicians, Epstein and Morocco. Basil will be covering the man in Nottingham who was not put in a mental institution because he's black and who went on to commit murder. And I'm going to be covering the reform of the justice system in the UK, including a massive AI rollout. And Patrick will be joining us again, at least in a recorded form, to report from Mexico on the continuing unrest there. But we're going to begin today with the Gorton and Denton by-election. And, David Lammy was tweeting this out yesterday or the day before. If we bring that on screen, proud to be out knocking doors today for Labour's brilliant candidate. Only Labour can stop reform. If you're in Gorton and Denton, vote for unity, hope and local renewal over division and hate. Well, I wonder how that went. Was Labour the only organisation or the only party that could stop reform? Well, it turns out it was not. So let's just bring the results on screen here. The Greens won by 40.7%, Reform 28.7%, Labour 25.4%, and then the rest. The Conservatives didn't even show. Basil, let me welcome you to the programme at this point and take us through your your view on what happened last night.
Great to be with you, Mike. Yes, it was a thumping great win for the Greens. That's the first thing to note. A lot of people have been predicting a very close call. Latest polls before we got the results showing a virtual three-way tie between Reform, the Greens and Labour. But in the end, the Greens got a 4,000 majority. Their share of the vote, 41%, is 4 times bigger than their previous best by-election results, and represents an increase in vote 5 times larger than anything they'd previously achieved. Worth perhaps noting, too, that the Conservative Party got just 2%. It's never been a Tory constituency, but nevertheless. Officials for Green and Labour both cited the Gaza genocide as still being a key factor. It's initiated a Labour soul-searching crisis. For many years, Labour revelled in the fact that so-called progressives had nowhere else to go. That was a quote attributed famously to Peter Mandelson, of all people. And that the fact that Labour were benefiting from the fact that the Greens were a blank party. Fill in your own word for that. The Labour minister used an expletive to describe them, but saying that Labour would be under threat should the Greens improve their leadership with a more articulate and altogether more populist leader. Well, they've got that now in Zach Polanski, and as a result, they won this thumping result. Difficult, of course, to criticise Polanski for the party's stance on Israel and Gaza, given that he himself is Jewish. But nevertheless, the opprobrium that's being heaped on the party because of their stance on Israel, Gaza, and indeed at the upcoming spring conference, they're due to debate a motion that Zionism is racism, something that's prompted an official response from the Israeli embassy here in the UK. Labour, for their part, Starmer's already been criticised for his response to the defeat, downplaying the scale, saying it was typical for governing parties to lose by-elections like that. It's partly true, but not to this extent. I mean, this had been a Labour seat for 100 years. It shows that the old demographics, the assumptions that people in certain parts of the country from certain backgrounds would automatically vote one way or another, whether that's for the Conservatives or for Labour, that's been completely destroyed. The Greens won this seat comfortably. Reform were in second, Labour a very poor third, and the Tories nowhere. The message that comes out of it is that people are heartily fed up of the uniparty that has served them so badly. On the doorsteps, of course, people talking about the cost of living crisis, something that Labour has singularly failed to address. Polanski this morning, when interviewed by Nick Robinson, said he wanted to introduce a wealth tax, that wealth and power had been concentrated in far too few hands for too long. Nick Robinson said, oh, well, a wealth tax will just simply drive all the millionaires and billionaires overseas. And Polanski countered by saying that Switzerland has a wealth tax and is known for its high percentage of high net worth individuals. So this is going to rumble on, the ramifications of this. What Labour does in future, who knows? Labour MPs are calling variously for Starmer himself to step down, or for at least to be a complete change of direction. And mostly they want Labour to go left because they have been outflanked from the left here. In fact, Starmer was also criticised for describing the Greens as extremist. So it's really put the cat among the pigeons, so to speak. People love all the hyperbole, these by-elections. I can remember going all the way back to Roy Jenkins winning Glasgow Hill Head for the nascent Social Democratic Party. People predicted the end of the two-party system then. That proved premature, but this time I think it's actually happening.
But I mean, Basil, I would probably argue that, and we have been arguing for quite some time, that whether it's Green or Reform, this is just another expression of the Uniparty, and the veneer that they're putting on themselves of being something different perhaps doesn't quite stack up when you start looking under the surface.
Well, I don't know that that's true. Certainly of the Greens, been talking about getting out of NATO. They were attacked by Labour for their policies on immigration, supposedly open border. That will have limited appeal in most of the UK. Also, their drug policy to legalise all drugs. And Labour were going around saying that they would be showing primary school children, the Greens want to show primary school children how to take drugs safely. I don't know if that's true, but personally, I think the Greens do represent a distinct alternative, and they may well be in alliance at the next general election with your party. That's what they've decided to call it now. The Corbyn Zara Sultana-led Left Labour Party, which recently had its Central Executive Committee elections. The Corbyn slate did best of all. They are finally getting themselves together, it would appear, and there's a lot of talk of an electoral pact between the Workers' Party of Britain, who, of course, have very different immigration policy from the Greens, the Workers' Party, your party, and indeed the Greens, to outflank Labour from the left.
Well, look, let's just have a quick listen to a couple of seconds of Hannah Spencer's acceptance speech. And what I want to do then is, well, we'll watch this and then we're going to contrast that with comments from Matt Goodwin. So let's listen to her first.
Okay, bear with me, because this is a lot. I didn't grow up wanting to be a politician. I'm a plumber. And 2 weeks ago, during all this, I also qualified as a plasterer. Because even in chaos, even under pressure, I get things done. I am no different to every single person here in this constituency. I work hard. That is what we do. Except things have changed a lot over the last few decades, because working hard used to get you something. It got you a house, a nice life, holidays. It got you somewhere. But now, working hard, what does that get you?
So that was the beginning of what she went on then to talk about the immigration situation and the suggestion that in fact the Greens, as you say, Basil, are very keen to have open borders. But let's just have a look at the comments made then by Matt Goodwin when he was asked why Reform had done so relatively badly, or compared to the expectations.
Sectarianism, that's what happened. We more than doubled our vote. We're in Labour's backyard. We're the second political force in this seat. We have planted a flag in Northern England. You'll have seen the reform boards up and down this constituency. More than 10,000 people voted for us. We can go on to Labour constituencies across Northern England, into the Red Wall, into Wales. We can win those seats. We will win those seats. Again, the Greens can only pull this kind of result off in a small number of seats. We can do this everywhere. Our ground game is the best game in British politics. We're not resorting to sectarian politics to get us over the line.
So his view is that reform can come second everywhere, apparently. But anyway, I realise that was probably a slip up. But look, Basil, this allegation of sectarianism, what's your view on that?
Well, it stems largely in this case, apparently, from the Greens producing leaflets in Urdu for members of the Pakistani community. And there's no doubt politics has become more tribal in the last few years. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the rump known as the Conservative Party, has issued a statement this morning blaming Labour for that shift, saying that it's Labour that had been stirring up division among communities for decades prior to this result. But I think we're certainly going to see more of this kind of pattern emerging in the future. The demographics breakdown of the way people voted indicates that for want of a better way of putting it, and Sky News did a breakdown on this, white people voted for the most part for reform. White people also voted for the Greens. Let's not forget that. But of course, the Greens also benefited from winning almost the entire Muslim vote, largely, of course, because of the Gaza genocide. So if people want to get away from sectarian politics, then a good start would be a universal condemnation of genocide.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, just to sort of reinforce this point, Richard Dearlove, a couple of days ago before the election result was out, had this to say about Zach Polanski, and actually seemed to be hitting one or two of the same kinds of points as Matt there. So let's have a listen to this.
I'm afraid I do. I think his view of geopolitics is verging on the absurd. This man is really dangerous. I dislike intensely the campaign that he's running in this by-election, which is designed to capture the Muslim vote. He has made crazy statements about NATO. He's come up with some weird idea about a alliance militarily with Brazil and Mexico. I think this.
Now, of course, that completely misrepresents the position that Polanski was expressing, no matter what you think about the man himself, because he was saying that Britain should be in a alignment with the EU, with other nations and also nations in the global south, including Brazil and Mexico. He wasn't suggesting just Brazil and Mexico. So, but anyway, what we should remember, of course, is who Richard Dearlove is, former head of MI6. And of course, this tweet, which was underneath there was a comment underneath that particular video clip, made this point very clearly. And of course, this is absolutely valid. Mr. Dearlove knew all about the satanic sex trafficking blackmail op of Maxwell and Epstein. He did nothing. How much help did he give them while they were in Europe? And these are valid criticisms. So, it is pretty rich, him making comments on domestic politics.
Well, yeah, I'm laughing. It's black humour. It's outrageous, really, the way these people step into the limelight and then try and hold the moral high ground, because the security services in UK have absolutely refused, it would appear, to investigate what's been going on with child abuse as just one subject at high level. And then they start to meddle in politics like this. I just find it appalling.
Well, look, let's stick with the Epstein.
Segue to Epstein, isn't it?
Segue, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah. So let's just kick off with a little BBC clip. No apologies, but it's quite interesting because Jess Parker from the BBC is asking some questions of Hillary Clinton. Let's just have a little look at how the girl did.
Do you regret the links that there have been? We have no links. We have a very clear record that we've been willing to talk about, which my husband has said. He took some rides on the airplane for his charitable work. I don't recall ever meeting him.
Did you ever meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I did on a few occasions, and thousands of people go to the Clinton Global Initiative. So it to me is not something that is really at the heart of what this matter is about. They are accused, and in both cases were convicted, of horrific crimes against girls and women. That should be the focus. And we are more than happy to say what we know, which is very limited and totally unrelated to their behavior or their crimes. And we want to do it in public because let's make this transparent.
There are calls for another individual who denies wrongdoing to go before Congress on this matter. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew. Do you think he should testify?
I think everybody should testify. Look,
including the former prince?
I think everybody should testify who is asked to testify. I just want it to be fair. I want everybody treated the same way. That's not true for my husband and me because other witnesses were asked to testify. They gave written statements under oath. We offered that. They want to pull us. Why do they want to pull us into this? To divert attention from President Trump. This is not complicated.
So really interesting clip. I saw that earlier on this morning. Mike, I think you were seeing it for the first time. But just fascinating to see the way that she behaves there, because I can tell you, if you look at more of that interview, she is clearly under pressure at one stage. But then she seems to gain the upper hand and says, well, yeah, we were connected, but we didn't do anything wrong. She doesn't mention weddings. Well, that doesn't come to light in this video clip that brought her into contact with Ghislaine Maxwell. But then she's saying something really interesting, that they're picking on us. We're saying we'd have put in a written testimony. We're quite happy to do that. We've got nothing to hide. My husband just got on the plane because of his charitable works. And of course, we can trust Bill Clinton when we remember back to the Monica Zelensky affair. So what is she really talking about? Well, she says she's being picked on. And in a way, I think she is being picked on because this takes the heat off the people really involved. And we've said over recent days as well that Andrew is absolutely constantly in the spotlight. But what is happening to investigate all the other high-level people? So, Mike, I don't know what you'd add to that, but I just found this a fascinating little clip. This is theatre.
Well, it is, and this I mean, I don't know what about the guilt or innocence of any of the people that have been mentioned so far, but the fact of the matter is, the way this looks to me is throw Mandelson, throw Andrew to the wolves, throw Hillary Clinton to the wolves, hopefully by picking a few high-profile people, that everybody else that was involved gets away with it. That doesn't mean that anybody should be getting away with anything. Everybody should be under significant scrutiny, and there needs to be a massive investigation.
Indeed. So let's dig in deeper. I'm going to stay with the BBC because something else the BBC was promoting this morning was this article here, which is that Epstein, according to the released emails, Epstein had been trying to buy a palace in Morocco days before his arrest in 2019. And he ended up signing an 11 million wire transfer on the 5th of July 2019, the day before his arrest, following an agreement to buy the offshore company that owned the property. Now, in the BBC article, they get into the sort of arrangements of the property in some detail. And the question is asked, was he trying to buy this in order to escape the US? But the timescale seems to be very short and it didn't work out anywhere. The article also points out that the released files, the Epstein files, appear to show that in 2010, Epstein asked former Labour Cabinet Minister Peter Mandelson to find him an assistant who could help find Epstein a house in Marrakesh. So those clips directly from the BBC report. And if we dive in a bit deeper, as the youngsters like to say these days. So Epstein's connections to Morocco go back to at least the early 2000s, and Virginia Giuffre, one of his most prominent accusers, talks of being flown to Tangier by Epstein and Maxwell to inspect the interior of properties. And if we just bring it a bit more, in 2002, Epstein attended the wedding of the Moroccan king, having been invited by former US President Bill Clinton. So this is a nice little circuit of people, very powerful. What were they up to? Well, that's, of course, what we need the intelligence services, the FBI and the CIA to be investigating. But this report is fascinating in what it tells us, because it goes on to say that the documents, the documents from the Epstein files show that Epstein made periodic visits to Morocco from 2012. He stayed in the exclusive Palmyra district, and there were a lot of expats there, including Qatari royal family people, and one of whom Epstein described as his Arab brother. And this one here, we'll end on this last excerpt. Subsequently, Epstein had to use his girlfriend and her network of contacts in Morocco to conduct further inspections of the property. And in 2018, he visited the property, this very sumptuous property, before final bids were made. But because he'd made a very low bid earlier on, the seller got pretty shirty. And so here at one stage, it appears that they were trying to use Leon Black's name as a billionaire investor friend of Epstein to help the sale go through. Now, why am I picking up on this BBC report? Well, of course, it's what the BBC doesn't talk about. And if I just bring on this Slate 2015 article, I could have chosen many others, but it says, what's it like to be gay in Morocco? And the first thing that comes up is that it talks about a square in Marrakesh, and it says that that is the city's primary gay cruising spot after dusk. And if we bring it a little bit more of the article, they go on to say at one particular point, Yves Saint Laurent had a home in Tangier for many years, as well as a villa in Marrakesh. And the darker side of this period in Tangier's history is apparent in the diaries of the English playwright Joe Orton, which made clear he was none too fussed about the age of the boys he was picking up there. Now, this is the key point, that when you get into Morocco and the dark side of Morocco, very young men, young boys and children are available, many of whom are available because of extreme poverty in the country. Now, the UK column has held material over many years that were kindly given to us by the late Colonel Barry Turner, one of a number of retired ex-military people desperately worried about what they saw as corruption in this country. I've put on screen heavily redacted 2 Scallywag front pages, but why are we interested in these documents? Well, if we bring it in the 1990s, Scallywag was carrying detailed reports alleging perverse corruption in Britain's political elite, including in Morocco. And this was across the political divide, so it was Tories and Labour. These are some of the articles in the gay gardens of Morocco: secret meetings, missing cabinet papers, and boys galore. And if I just bring in a little more detail on this particular article, it's talking about the procuring of children. And if we just expand this bit on screen, it's talking about a 24-year-old Moroccan in Rissi, unemployed student of chemistry who supplies hashish to the hotels that have tourists. And the reporters from Scallywag met him, and he was happy in the gardens of a very posh hotel to offer them children from the ages of 6 to 16. £16 a boy, but they also pointed out that if you want to do harm a child physically, you were going to resort to physical violence as part of the sexual interaction with the child. That was going to cost you a lot more. Now, the very brave reporters of Scallywag even emphasised the horrors of what was going on here in that particular edition by putting out an advert, and they were simply emphasising the trail of perverted abuse. And let's remember that according to their allegations, they were talking very senior political people in UK. UK's government. These are indicative of other headlines that Scallywag has had. Tory gay love nest exposed. And if I remember correctly, this links through to Dolphin Square type abuse in London. They were also investigating the abuse of children in care homes and residential homes, very detailed, well put together articles. And eventually, the editor, Simon Regan of Scallywag, was prepared to challenge one of the biggest libel law firms in the country over the accuracy of what they were saying. It was a challenge. We are reporting this. You come for us if you want to. Well, at one particular stage, a challenge was made to Scallywag, and that cost them money. But it appears...
We'll talk about that in a second. But just before we move on to that, then, Brian, you should maybe say something about why we have redacted those images.
Well, it's a redaction of not only some images, but it's also text, because the names being mentioned are people who are still very much currently serving in the political arena. And we get back into this very difficult situation where people have done extremely good investigative journalism in their reports. But the danger is that mention under the current libel laws means that there is a suppression of people trying to take the lid off the abuse of children.
Basil, just before I move on with this, do you have any comment to make on what we've talked about here?
Well, only that from my involvement in student politics at Cambridge University, there were always sort of dark whispers about the activities of some individuals in the Conservative Party. Like that, it was all regarded as a bit of a joke at the time, a harmless joke, really, that there might be some Tories who like little boys and things. And of course, there's that famous quote from the former Chief Whip saying that MPs would go to the Whip's office if they had a problem, perhaps some unpaid debts or something to do with small boys. So I never came across it personally myself, but as I say, there were always sort of whispers, often in joke form.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I'll just hold this up on the screen. That's one of the issues. We have a whole bundle of reports here that make extremely interesting reading. But of course, let's remember what the journalists were trying to do. They were trying to get the lid off the horrific abuse of children by very powerful people. And I think to some extent, it appears that they paid the price for doing that.
Yes. Well, let's bring the Scallywag archive on screen, because that is available if you want to go and see some of the contents of this. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of quotes from this website, because it says here, Scallywag most famously was sued for libel by John Major over an article claiming Major was having an affair with a domestic, Claire Latimer. This cost Scallywag dearly. Of course, it turns out that Major was having an affair, but with Edwina Curry. The editors had been sold a red herring, and although strapped for cash, they battled on. It was only after a mysterious break-in to the office, when crucial files and computers were removed, that Simon began to lose heart. And then it goes on to say that Angus went on to produce Spiked, a couple of issues which you can also find on the Scallywag archive site. Angus was killed in a car accident, in inverted commas. Simon died in 2000, aged 58, thwarted in his attempts to expose paedophilia in high places. Well, look, the investigations that they carried out, as you say, Brian, were absolutely spectacular, and I would say that nobody has come close to date to
what they identified, and particularly what was taking place in Morocco. And of course, now we are seeing the links with Epstein and Morocco. Why would he want to go there? Beautiful property is one thing, but easily obtained small children at a very cheap price would be another, I would guess, attractive thing for him.
Indeed. Now, related to this, of course, just a week ago, we put out a recording of a presentation that was given at a UK column event in 2015. If you haven't seen it yet, it's called From Rotherham to Epstein. Absolutely recommend everybody watches this, and please do share it as widely as you possibly can, because it is extremely important. I think that we all have an understanding of how this pedophilic system works. It is systemic, it is systematic, and it is something that has not gone away. Nothing has changed. And so we've got to be aware that whatever has happened historically, it's still happening.
Indeed.
Okay, let's move on to the justice system then, and let's bring David Lammy on screen, because having just returned from the AI summit in India, he then headed straight to the Microsoft AI tour at the Excel Centre in London on Tuesday to give a speech on the modernisation of the justice system, the so-called justice system. It was a bit hilarious because the people there were somewhat, they weren't necessarily interested in what he was saying. But anyway, what he did say was that he wanted to present his vision for the future of the court system, and that will, he said, deliver faster and fairer justice for victims by combining investment, reform, and modernisation. Now, I'm quite sure it's not his vision. I'm sure it's somebody else's. And I'm sure that it isn't going to deliver faster and fairer justice for victims. I think it's much more likely that this is all about building out another part of the panopticon. But let's just have a listen to a little bit of what he said. And I do suggest you try not to lose your lunch, but let's listen to this.
I can announce that we will fund unlimited sitting days in the Crown Court next year. This will be the highest number ever funded in the history of this country. We will also fund the magistrates' courts to hear as many cases as we estimate the system can deliver, backed up by funding to recruit and train more magistrates to meet the demand, and a national campaign to boost the ranks of our magistracy, increasing its size to 21,000 by 2029. Together, this will enable the criminal courts to get through more work than ever before. And of course, it means that victims get justice as quickly as possible. It is part of a record £2.78 billion settlement for the courts and the tribunals over the coming year, which includes £287 million for the fabric of the estate itself, delivering more vital repairs and digital upgrades to court buildings up and down the country.
Okay, so that's what he had to say. 2.45 billion. That seems like value for money, Brian.
Let's get people into court. This is the important thing. Of course, the backlog that drives all of his agenda and Leveson's agenda as well comes on the excuse of the damage done during lockdown. But let's get more people into court. Mike, for me, this man is one of the most dangerous people in the country. Leveson's there on his shoulder, but softly spoken. But this is the state, the dictatorship being put into place in front of our eyes.
Well, let's bring it back on screen then, because he set out several key measures that will be that'll be taken forward from part 2 of Sir Brian Leveson's independent review of criminal courts. I laugh at that statement, but anyway, he said that Leveson considered the way cases are listed. So the national listing framework is another thing that he's announced, and this is supposedly about standardising the process of how it's decided when cases are heard and so on. Now, there's no mention of this new court listing framework being made available to the press or the public following the removal of that facility that we reported on a week or two ago. But he says it's going to help address what many view as a postcode lottery for victims of crime. And this is going to help ensure serious cases like rape and sexual offences are treated with the consistency and urgency they deserve. So that's his position. So these are the key areas that they want to advertise. They are talking about the highest ever funding deal. Well, he talked about that a second ago. No Crown Court sitting days cap, so no more restriction on the number of days that the Crown Court can be sitting. 287 million in the estate and digital upgrades, and funding for magistrates' courts at full capacity. As I say, he then describes what sitting days are, and they talk about the key role and in how quickly cases move through the system. And so on. But then he went on to say, last year we piloted an AI tool. So now we start to get to the basis of the thing. So they're talking about piloting an AI tool there in the probation service, Justice Transcribe, which records meetings between officers and offenders. And the need for handwritten notes to be typed up later. He wants to see many more AI initiatives like this. So they're going to invest more in the in-house Justice AI unit, 12 million in additional funding. But on top of that, they're going to go even further because they're going to strengthen their relationship with Microsoft and others, piloting the solutions of UK-based startups in order to create, as you will see in 1 second, an unprecedented partnership between the public and private sectors. And that's what this is all about. It's this massive public-private partnership that Ben Rubin talks about so often. This is absolutely key to how the governance of this country is being changed. Let's just have a brief listen to how he justified this.
We face an uncomfortable truth. The world has changed and the justice system has not. From our huge investment in our courts, bigger than ever before, to our comprehensive reform programme, the biggest since 1971, we will renew the system after years of decline so that it's serious about justice as it exists today, and once again we're able to deliver the swifter outcomes that victims should be able to expect and have always deserved.
So it's the usual froth. It's all about the victims, helping the victims. But of course, the courts are closing in on free people.
Absolutely. So then yesterday, Lamy announced the Courts and Tribunal Bill, which is the legislation which is going along with all this. And he also produced this shiny new propaganda website. If we bring that on screen to add further justification to all this, it's pathetic, really. But anyway, just finally, while we leave that on screen, on juries, in a speech he claimed that these changes are not going to diminish the role of juries because juries are the cornerstone, he said, of justice in the UK. And then with a perfectly straight face, he said that he will diminish the role of juries, of course, by removing them from more types of cases than ever, because jury trials take twice as long as other kinds of trials. Well, we knew this was coming, and we at the UK column of Brian has reported this recently. But my question is, with the direction of travel that we're seeing here, how long is it going to be before juries are made up of 12 Claude or ChatGPT agents? Because that seems to be where we're heading.
Absolutely. That's where we're heading, Mike. They want to get rid of human beings in the system because human beings can show compassion, and we bring in jury nullification, which helps us absolutely remove bad law. AI solves all that problem. So
yes. Okay, let's move on then. If you like what the UK column does, we do need your ongoing support. So if you could head over to the front page of the UK column website and click on the button there, that will take you to a page that explains how you can support us financially. Thank you very much to everybody that continues to do so. If you don't, or you aren't able to help us that way, then please do share this program and everything else that we produce that you like, because that helps us defeat the censorship regime in this country. Tonight, Jerm and Charles and I are speaking about what will happen if America attacks Iran. That's at 7 p.m. for the weekly banter. And Carl's speaking to Dr. Warwick Powell again, this time on the waning days of the American empire. That's at 9. And then on Sunday at 7, we have the next edition of the 1,000 Words podcast. Let's just have a quick look at the trailer for this.
The threat is if you leave the cult, God will come down and smite you. Just everything's shattered. Like, you know, there is no democracy. There's no media. There's no true journalism. Well, I grew up in a cult, in a Muslim cult within a cult. Anyway, arrive at the studio. I need to pee, so I quickly go to the toilet. David Icke is in the far right corner, exactly as I envisioned him, in a blue sky jumper, taking a
So join us on Sunday evening at 7. Doc Malik there, the guest of Jake Fern, to be painted. So, and I believe you're not too far away from this yourself, Brian.
From what, Mike?
From a portrait.
Well, yes. The portrait, the last time I saw it, had been sort of 90% completed. I think I got off pretty lightly. It was a very enjoyable experience because we had a lot of fun talking. But sat in the chair. I did mention the dentist at one point, which I don't think I think that made Jake laugh actually. But we will see what the audience think of my portrait. I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, but that's for a future month. Doc Malik is the next one, so join us at 7 on Sunday for that. An article from Mark Anderson on the website now, if you haven't seen it yet. Amid the bankers' diversionary tantrums, let's examine their monetary mechanics. Have a look at that. Please share it if you find it interesting. And much more from Mark to come. A couple of interviews on the way in the next few days. Right, Brian, on Monday's program, you showed a little bit of Patrick's initial report from Mexico on what had been happening there following the killing of the drug lord. He sent another report today.
Well, he sent a very comprehensive report. It's too long for us to show as one on today's news. So we've got some segments which I think are really excellent. And what we'll do is we'll run through those. So this first one is really an introduction, again, a scene setter, where Patrick is there in Mexico and he's talking about being there and what's happened. And then we'll work through into the other segments when he starts to focus in on more detail about who's involved and ultimately what geopolitical forces seem to be impacting on Mexican politics. So let's have a look at Patrick in a pretty sunny location. I'm still a little bit jealous, albeit a troubled place at the moment.
We're reporting from Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. This is on the west coast of the country. And on Sunday, February 22nd, the unthinkable happened. This is normally a destination known for its sun, its great weather. This is a major tourist hub, not only for Americans, but for Canadians as well as Europeans. And in the early hours of Sunday, a raid took place. The Mexican federal forces conducted a raid on a cartel member from the Jalisco cartel New Generation, and his name was Nemesio El Mancho Oseguera Cervantes, and this is a major cartel leader that was apparently killed during the raid. Now, this was meant to capture him, but he did die en route to hospital facilities. 4 other gunmen were also killed during this raid. As a result of this, the cartel in question mounted a massive wave of retaliation, beginning here in Puerto Vallarta. And this was the early hours of Sunday morning. This resulted in unrest on the streets. There were clashes between law enforcement and the cartel members, but most notably, there were buses and cars burned. Attacks happened all over the city. This wasn't even confined to Puerto Vallarta. This is a city of approximately 300,000, of which there are upwards of 50,000 of those are expats from North America and other destinations that have settled down here. So big international presence in terms of foreigners. Now, other cities in the Jalisco region and this part of Mexico, like Guadalajara, were also affected by the clashes and the unrest. Even as far south as Cancun was a city that was under lockdown. Now, the raid took place in Tapalpa. Now, this is known as a sort of cartel stronghold, which is located approximately 400 kilometers southeast of Puerto Vallarta, where we are now. But the retaliation was all across the city. Buildings were set on fire. We have been given footage from some of the people who live here. We'll show some of that. But buildings were set on fire, cars set on fire, buses as well, taxis. We even have one report of a taxi which was attacked outside or very near the conference center where we were participating.
So a really good introduction there, but one of the key things that Patrick had stressed was that for most people in Mexico, the thing emerged out of nowhere. So the the destruction and the violence appeared on the streets, and that was a big shock. And then there was a lockdown. Now, as it's calmed down, more pieces are coming to the surface. So in this next report from Patrick, he's having a little bit more about the drivers. And so he's talking politics, and he's also in particular talking about the power of the cartels, one in particular.
This was deemed by the Mexican authorities as a código rojo, which is code red, so major civil emergency. And, you know, looking at this, just stepping back, my initial evaluation, my initial feeling was this was a power struggle. This is a constant power struggle between law enforcement in Mexico. It's not confined to Mexico, of course. There's other Central American countries where this power struggle is ongoing, and of course the cartels, and various government agencies and the various cartels. A new generation of Jalisco being one of the biggest and most powerful, not just in Mexico, but in the world, in fact. So normally what you would have is a symbolic retaliation. If governments mounted any kind of operation like this, then the cartels have to retaliate. They have to have a show of force. Otherwise, they could risk other rival cartels could see this as weakness. So they have to make a statement, a public statement, i.e. driving buses into intersections, holding up the economy of a city like Puerto Vallarta. It's a major disruption. It's a major statement. So they did that. What the government did in return is, well, it was odd because we saw that streets were empty, as you can see from the footage, which we shared at the time. The streets were empty. We didn't see a lot of EMS, certainly not a lot of fire departments. I mean, in many cases, these buildings just burned and cars just burned. So no EMS, very few police officers, at least where we were in the center of the city. So it was a bit strange. I mean, people were speculating whether this was staged. There's all sorts of theories abound, as you could imagine here, because no one had ever seen anything quite this extensive, especially hitting multiple cities as well. So from that point of view, it was unique, a unique event. We knew we were seeing something here that hadn't seen before. But with cartels like CJNG or the Jalisco Cartel New Generation, you'll see this is their brand, which is on all of their products here. So they have a near monopoly, you could say, in terms of in the drug trade through Mexico, and you'll see this is their sort of corporate brand, if you will, of the cartels, which appears on all their products to ensure the product's quality and reliability, much like an international corporation. So they're protecting their brand, and they're well known throughout the region and beyond.
I mean, that's a very interesting point. My question is, do international corporations actually behave any differently to the Mexican drug cartels?
Well, the international corporations try to do it as if they are squeaky clean. At least if you deal with a cartel, you know what you're dealing with. So maybe the cartel get the points on that. Really tremendous reporting from Patrick. And this next segment, he is delving deeper into what I call the geopolitical drivers. So it's happening in Mexico, but what actually is also impacting on the country and who's got a finger in the pie. Let's have a look at this next segment.
Just before this, there were reports that Claudia Sheinbaum, she is the president of Mexico, she had been instituting a major crackdown, taking out some of the corrupt officials at the mayoral level, county or regional level, as well as within the federal government from the previous Obrador government and also the Calderon government, just sort of legacy positions that were somehow caught up in the middle of these corruption rings between government, cartels, and politicians. So that was going on. So, and then this happened. Now, you have to also look at the fact is, and if you want to really now see what might be driving this geopolitically, this comes on the heels of Trump making major announcements that he is going to, use the U.S. military to take down the cartels. So think about that for a moment. And then Trump was accusing the Mexican president, Sheinbaum, of that saying the cartels are running Mexico. She's not running Mexico, says Trump. The cartels are running Mexico. A major sort of insult, but at the same time, she's cooperating with the U.S. government and the U.S. intelligence and so forth to try to, restrict the flow of drugs coming in, most notably fentanyl, into the United States. So this is all going on. By the way, Elon Musk also piles in, claiming that she's working for the cartels or something to that effect. And now Scheinbaum is suing Elon Musk for defamation. So that's another byproduct of this. It seems like Musk wants to get in Trump's good book by attacking Trump's perceived political enemies. Now, when I say perceived political enemies, why would the Mexican president be an enemy of Trump? Well, there's a lot of potential answers to that. But one of them is that Scheinbaum wants to aid Cuba. The U.S. is imposing a military blockade on Cuba to strangle the country and create, famine, chaos, just punish Cuba for having the government it does. So it's not allowing fuel in. Things are getting to a crisis moment in Cuba. Mexico is one of those countries that will come to the aid of Cuba and wants to deliver oil to them to break the U.S. blockade. So that's quite interesting if you think about it. Now, make a mental note there for a second as to that. That's an important data point there. The second is Trump has recently proscribed the various drug gangs as terrorist groups. Okay, what does that mean? That means that when the U.S. government or the British government or anybody proscribes some kind of a gang or organization as a terrorist group, it means that they can take away due process, and it means they can engage with that supposed terror threat extrajudicially or extra legally, outside of the legal process, outside of the normal judiciary or constraints of law. This is what designating terrorist groups gives Western governments in the 21st century, the ability to bypass any due process or law just by labeling them an international terrorist group. What does this do? This gives the U.S. the ability to engage inside Mexico, either from an intelligence point of view or from a military point of view as well. So this potentially has opened the door. The other thing this has done is put a lot of pressure on Scheinbaum, because what's happened here is that this is not only does she want to assist Cuba, which obviously is angering Washington, that anybody would dare to give any humanitarian assistance to Cuba, but Mexico is also recognizing Palestine as a state, okay, and also has rebuffed Trump's membership offer for the Board of Peace in Gaza. So from the Israeli lobby point of view, Mexico and other Latin American governments like Venezuela are deemed as enemies. And so the Israelis are trying to push the Isaac Accords, which is the Abraham Accords for Latin America. They're trying to flip all these governments to far-right governments and then get them to be pro-Israel and reverse the UN vote on Palestine. That's basically the long and the short of the Isaac Accords. So that's interesting. It does get even more interesting if you go a little bit deeper. So this is way beyond the so-called Donroe Doctrine of U.S. Flexing its muscles in the Western Hemisphere. Scheinbaum has also made a statement condemning the U.S. for U.S. weapons going into the hands of the cartels. So she made a statement to that effect.
Obviously, Patrick, limited for time, and we've had to cut these clips down, but bringing in a lot of very interesting points around what has happened here, and it starts to get deeper and more opaque the more you look at. Now, there is one short clip to finish on, but I wonder whether, before we go there, Basil, if you've been able to hear those clips, okay, whether you've got any comments on what your thoughts are on what's taken place.
Well, the initial raid sounds like something out of Scarface, doesn't it? With the cartel leader and 4 of his henchmen all dying, presumably as a result of gunfire, very dramatic, American action film type events. But, Scheinbaum, who is herself Jewish, incidentally, the president of Mexico, has made moves to recognize Palestine. And it is a fact that 90% of the weapons that the cartels use come from the United States, and the other 10% are Israeli. So we have to wonder, therefore, with all Trump's accusations of Scheinbaum being in the pocket of the cartels, who in fact is supplying these American weapons. A few years ago, the death toll in the Mexican drug wars was around 50,000 people brutally murdered. I think that's now more like 60 or 70,000. I mean, the numbers of people murdered, often very sadistically, are absolutely off the charts. And if Scheinbaum is finally getting to grips with the situation, so much the better. And lastly, yes, the Isaac Accords, honestly, they give names to these things. Israel has got its man in place with Milei in Argentina, although I don't think he's going to last very much longer. And they would dearly love to see that replicated. They've got recalcitrant leaders in Brazil and Colombia, amongst others. So we'll have to see how that develops in the coming months and years.
Yeah, Basil, thank you very much for that. And a nice little segue into Patrick's last comments. You've mentioned weapons. Let's hear what Patrick has to say.
Now, we've been covering this for years at 21st Century Wire, Operation Fast and Furious. We've documented this problem, an ongoing issue, but this recent report by Freddie Ponton, which we filed this week, a great investigation by a great journalist there, he is basically saying that most of the weapons in Mexico are Israeli and American origin. Huge amounts of Israeli weapons, as well as 150,000 50 caliber rounds that were also traced to the U.S. military. And what you have to realize is these cartels, like Jalisco cartel, New Generation, they're armed to the teeth. I mean, here's a video from 2020 where you can see just how well armed and equipped they are. So in some cases, probably be better equipped than the Mexican military in some cases. So there's that to contend with as well. We also have the Ukrainian Foreign Legion recruiting from the Mexican, Latin American, Colombian drug cartels to train fighters to fight in Ukraine, to learn UAV, drone training, as well as urban warfare tactics. And then ostensibly bringing those back to Mexico or back to Latin America on behalf of the cartels. So that the PMCs, private military companies, were actively recruiting among those sectors to bring them to Ukraine. So this was also reported and confirmed by Russian SVR intelligence. So there's that Ukrainian angle as well. So the U.S. would have full knowledge of this because they were effectively managing operations in Ukraine. So for anyone in the U.S. or U.S. intelligence to play dumb on this, it would be disingenuous.
So clearly a lot more to be said on Mexico because there's many fingers in the pie, and very interesting that the darker those and more dangerous those fingers are, the more trouble there is for the Mexican people, which is a common theme we're seeing in countries around the world. So we'll do more on that in the forthcoming days, and Patrick will no doubt be giving us more material in any case.
Yeah, we'll have the full report on the UK Column website after the news programme this afternoon. Basil, let me welcome you back to the programme. If we just bring this Telegraph article on screen here, because this is quite an interesting headline. This headline saying, and most of the other mainstream press are covering this and more or less the same thing, Nottingham killer was not sectioned because he was black. Valdo Calacane was given at-home treatment plan after psychotic episode because of over-representation of young black males in detention.
Absolutely off the charts, and it ended in tragedy when he murdered 3 people, 2 young students, and a 65-year-old care worker. And as you say, Mike, he wasn't sectioned because of apparently the overrepresentation of black people in mental health institutions, something that the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, described in December as unacceptable. But surely any mental health decision about sectioning a paranoid schizophrenic who may be capable of extreme violence should be purely on clinical grounds. The color of his skin must be irrelevant, anybody's skin. So the idea that Streeting wants to go now towards sort of quotas of number of people, I mean, if it's unacceptable that black people are overrepresented amongst those sectioned, then what is he proposing to actually do something about this? Well, if so, this is the result, isn't it? And 3 people have lost their lives. It beggars belief, Mike. It really does.
Basil, if to add, this just comes into my head, but if you remove the clinical diagnosis part of the pathway to putting somebody into a psychiatric unit, or not putting them in, but putting them in, you're actually well on your way to the true sort of Soviet state, where the psychiatric gulag forms part of the overall prison system. So I wonder whether something a lot darker is going on here. This is meddling, possibly just to see how the public reacts to this.
Well, we can talk more about this in extra, because I want to bring in the parallels between this type of incident and the way that the grooming gangs were permitted to continue their activities,
Indeed, yeah.
Allegedly because the people in positions of authority were worried about being perceived as racist in some way. So anyway, we'll talk about that in extra, but let's finish with this, because on Wednesday, Charles was talking about the threat from the Pentagon to cancel Anthropic contracts if Anthropic did not lift safeguards. And if you remember, the article said that Pete Hegseth had met with Anthropic CEO on Tuesday at the Pentagon amid a dispute over the AI firm's usage policy, which bars its model Claude from being used for mass surveillance or to develop weapons that can be used without human oversight. Now, quick as a flash, on literally within 24 hours. Just put that back up on screen a second, Chris, if you don't mind. Quick as a flash, this happened because Anthropic published a new posting here, their responsible scaling policy version 3.0. That was published on the 24th. And it says this, it says our new RSP introduces a requirement to develop and publish a frontier safety roadmap, which will describe our concrete plans for risk mitigations across the areas of security, alignment, safeguards, and policy. Rather than being hard commitments, these are public goals that we will openly grade our progress towards. We may never get there, but we'll head towards them. This strategy of non-binding but publicly declared targets borrows from the transparency approach we've been championing for frontier AI legislation, although it provides the public with much more detail than this required under existing legislation, and from the successes of our previous RSP versions. So they have caved completely to Hegseth's threats to withdraw funding and withdraw contracts, and they've removed the limitation on the use of their AI product for war fighting purposes. And I think that is pretty much says it all, doesn't it?
It does, Mike. Yeah. But everything seems to be becoming more obvious in this crazy world, but more discussion in extra.
Yeah, so we will be back in a few minutes for UK Column News Extra. If you UK Column members, stay on the live stream, and we'll see you there in a couple of minutes. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Don't forget Jerm and Carl tonight, and also Doc Malik at 7 p.m. on Sunday. We'll see you on Monday at 1 p.m. as usual. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.